Hey guys, welcome to another VATSIM tutorial here on the AviationPro channel. In this video we're going to take a look at how to connect to the VATSIM network using your Pilot client. So are you ready to go online? Let's go. So in the previous video I already showed you that there are different Pilot clients, and depending on which simulator you use, you can use different Pilot clients to connect to the VATSIM network. In this video, however, I'm going to show you how to connect to the VATSIM network using one of the most popular Pilot clients and the Pilot clients that most people use. I'm using vPilot for prepared version 4, but it should be a most similar procedure also for other Pilot clients that you're using for other simulators. And although there's only one connect button and it's seemingly very easy to connect to the VATSIM network, there are some things to keep in mind and that you have to do before you connect to the network. So let's take a look at how that goes.
So guys, let's take a look once again at vPilot. So setting it up correctly before connecting is very important. I'm going to show you why. So let's start it up. So I'm running a sim, so vPilot will automatically connect to the simulator, and then we can go ahead and check out the settings. That's very important. That's the first thing we want to do. So let's go to settings. So the first part that we have to set up is the network part. And here you just put in your VATSIM ID and your VATSIM password, both of which you should have received or set up via email once you set up a VATSIM account. Then you put in your full real world name, and you can enter your home airport. So for me, it would be Echo Hotel Romeo Delta, which is Rotterdam Airport in the Netherlands. So any airport that's closest to you in the real world, or maybe the main airport of your country, for example, Amsterdam. That's usually what I put in. There we go. And this kind of helps people identify where you're from, and based on that they might, for example, if they send you a message, they don't have to do it in English, but they can do it in Dutch because they know that you're from the Netherlands, or they kind of might anticipate what kind of accent you will have, okay? That's a small little detail, but it kind of helps identify who you are and where you're from, which might be helpful in some circumstances. And next we have the VATSIM server. In the previous video I already showed you how to ping the servers, and basically you have to select the server with the lowest ping, or at least a server which is closest to your real world location. So for me the lowest ping or the server with the lowest ping is UK1. And again, all these servers are connected with each other, so if one pilot connects on UK1 and another pilot on Australia, they will both see each other, and the controller will see both pilots as well. So don't worry about that, you can just select one server that is closest to you. Okay, then we go to the notifications. I just have them all enabled. Specifically, I want to mention this one, show incoming text messages in simulator, which is handy. So when an air traffic controller sends you a message or contact me, for example, which indicates that you should go to his or her frequency, then you can actually see that within the simulator. So you don't have to L-tap or put vPilot on another screen, for example. And also this one, make sure you have this one enabled, sound buzzer for push to talk while not on voice. Basically what this means that if you have tuned in a frequency right here or in the sim, and that frequency is not active, so there's no controller online for that frequency, then when you push the push to talk button, you will hear some kind of buzzer. Okay, it's not a very loud buzzer, it's just a low volume sound, so don't worry about that. But it's kind of handy to identify like, hey, I'm not on the frequency, or maybe, for example, you've been given a frequency but you've put in the wrong one, and you hear that buzzer, and then you know, oh, I've put in the wrong frequency. I might better go back to the previous frequency and ask again what the correct frequency is. Okay, so make sure you have that enabled. It's kind of handy. Then for the fonts, yeah, I'm just using default. You don't have to touch that really. Then the audio setup is quite important. We're going to talk more about the setup in the hardware video that is next. But right here, what you should do, if you have speakers and a headset, I would let all the flight sim sounds run through the speakers, which are the default device in the Windows audio settings. But if you have a headset, then use that as the microphone and output device in vPilot settings. So I've set the microphone device to the Wave microphone of Logitech USB headset, and the output device to the Wave speakers of the Logitech USB headset. Okay. And then I've put up the volume all the way to 100% because I can control the volume with my headset volume buttons. Now, if you've seen some flights on VATSIM, you might know that the audio quality is not superior. It's not really that good. In the real world, VHF radios are not that clear and crisp always either. You know, there's often a lot of static sounds, and it really kind of depends on the terrain and the meteorological conditions, actually, how well the radio will sound. But if you have trouble to understand ATC on VATSIM, you can try to disable VHF simulation for audio output, okay? So what this will do, it will kind of remove this artificial radio sound that is added to the transmissions over the VATSIM radios, okay? I like to have it enabled. I kind of like the challenge of, you know, not hearing the ATC that clear. If I disable it, it almost kind of sounds like a bit like TeamSpeak and a lot of echoing in the background, like you can really hear that someone is in a room. But this setting, in my opinion, makes it a bit more realistic. So you can try to disable it if you need to. Also, if you want to have a more clear output, you can try to use another form of output. For example, you can try to use direct sound, and if that's more clear for you, just use that. You kind of have to experiment with that, but I've just set it to the wave speakers like this. Now when you're ready, you can click the apply button, and once you've done that, you can have an option that says to calibrate the mic, and I would really recommend you to do that. Basically what this will do, it's run a little test where you have to remain silent for 5 seconds, and then you have to speak out loud for 5 seconds, like a normal speech that you would talk to an air traffic controller. And based on that, the vPilot will set a squelch, so kind of a level at which your microphone will activate. And so make sure you calibrate the mic in the vPilot settings, but also just in the Windows audio settings. Make sure that you sound well over the radios. It's really, really important. More about that in the next video, but I'm already saying it here. Really make sure that if you have a headset, it doesn't need to be an expensive one, but even with a cheap one, make sure the settings are correct and test for yourself using the voice recorder of Windows or whatever. Make sure you test yourself if you sound okay, alright? You don't want to be that person who talks very violently in this microphone, okay? So make sure you check that out. Next, we have the push to talk key. So that's the key that you use to transmit over the VATSIM radios. I've set it to scroll lock, and I'm gonna explain why in the next video. But you can do any keyboard key or a joystick button. For example, I can set my joystick button if it works. Oh, there we go. We have button 2 on the Logitech Extreme 3D joystick. So as you can see, I can now use that as my push to talk key. Okay, more about that in a later video, but just so you know that you can do that here. Now over to model matching, and this is a topic that I get a lot of questions about, and a lot of people seem to think that it's very difficult. Well, actually it isn't. Since vPilot 2, this model matching process has been very easy and automized, basically. So if you check what vPilot does when you start it up, it's gonna first of all do a version check. So if there are any updates, it will prompt you to update. But it's also checking for updated model matching data. So it will kind of look, hey, did you add any AI aircraft models to your sim or not? And if you did, and especially on the first startup of vPilot, it will do so anyways. But if you removed or added any models, it will scan your simulator folder, and it will generate so-called rule sets. And these rule sets determine based on the aircraft type and the call sign a pilot is using on the VATSIM network. Based on that information, these rule sets will determine what model that is included in your installation of your simulator is best to use to portray that aircraft that's flying on VATSIM in your sim, okay? So that's the basic idea how it works. So if you install any AI package, whether it payware or freeware, for example, Ultimate Traffic Live by Flight 1, or like I'm using vPilot AI, both links are in the description. If you just install those models, vPilot will automatically scan for those models and apply model matching itself. Now, this automatic model matching might not be always as accurate as you want it to be. So a lot of times AI package developers come with custom rule sets. I'm gonna leave this right now, these settings, just keep them on. So it's just gonna see, okay, which models I'm using. So I'm using the vPilot AI models. and you can shift the priority if you want to. But the custom rule sets are kind of the the important things. You can just add them here. So if you leave this empty, vPilot will use its own its own rule sets, and based on the scanning of your model folder, it will determine what aircraft to display in your sim. But if you use custom rule sets, then your aircraft portrayal of other pilots will be probably a bit more accurate. So for example, we have here 3 rule sets that belong to the vPilot AI, and if you open them here in the text format, so for example, first of all, this is the first one on the list. That's the highest priority, which will scan which aircraft type is the pilot using. Okay, so for example, if the pilot is using a Boeing 738, so B738 is the correct ICAO code, then it will say, okay, then we have to use this particular model. That's going to be the model that's being displayed. But next, of course, you also want to display an airline. For example, if the pilot is using the call sign prefix UPS and the type code is the Airbus A306, then it will show this model with this airline livery. So that's kind of the basic way how that works, and you can kind of play around with this yourself if you have the time to really generate your own rule set. So based on the call sign, well, first of all, based on the model that the pilot is using, and then based on the call sign and the model, then you can determine, okay, which model together with which texture am I going to display. That's kind of the basic idea how it works. But if you want to keep it simple, just ignore all of this. Just let vPilot, generate its own rule sets based on the models that you have installed, as long as you install some kind of AI package, whether it be payware or freeware. Now over to the performance steps. This is just to kind of improve performance. If you lose a lot of frame rates when a lot of aircraft are displayed, now normally it's not going to be that busy on the VATSIM network, but for example, during events like Cross the Pond, it might be very busy. Now in the real world, you don't really see aircraft at such large distance anyway, but I've just set it to 25 nautical miles and the maximum aircraft to display of almost 1,000. But again, it probably won't happen that you have 1,000 aircraft within a 25 nautical mile range from your aircraft. Updates, really enable updates because vPilot is in active development, so it's good to have the latest version. And then you have some other options like automatically squawk mode Charlie on takeoff. I would disable that. We're going to talk about that later. And keep window visible. Yeah, we'll just leave that like that. So hit apply once you're ready, and then OK, and then you should have set up vPilot all correctly. So in the previous video, I already showed you about tools like SurfInfo, VetSpy, or another tool that I didn't mention last time, but which is new, is called AccuMap. But basically these tools let you show the current and booked ATC activity. Okay, so right now, again, it's morning that I'm recording this, so it's not very busy. But it looks like there's ATC in Luxembourg. So maybe let's zoom in a little bit on that, or go to the controller list. You can see that there's some ATC there, and there's also an ATIS frequency. And the ATIS frequency, which is a frequency we know with an automated message, which is very easy to check and observe. So maybe we'll go through that airport and do some observing. So unfortunately, the tower control at Luxembourg went away, so I'll just go to an area with a more busy ATC. This is Melbourne. I'm going to park my aircraft at a stand at Melbourne. Again, not on an active runway. Just park your aircraft at a stand. You don't have to file a flight plan or anything. We're just going to park that aircraft right there. And then we're going to take a look at how to connect to VATSIM using vPilot. So we're now parked at the stand. It's time to click the connect button. Okay, and this is going to be for real right now. So we're now going to go on the VATSIM network. So first of all, if you have connected before, you can check the recent aircraft that you've flown. But you have to put in the call sign. Call sign is always mandatory, otherwise the air traffic controllers have no idea who you are. Flight plan filing is right now not important. You can just sit at the stand or gate and just observe air traffic control. But it's always important to connect with the correct call sign. So in this case, my call sign, the airline that I'm flying is Atlas Air, and their ICAO code, so that's a 3-letter code, is GTI. And then you can put in any flight number. I'm just going to put in a random flight number right here. Now in general, if you're going to make a flight from A to B using an airliner, and that's probably what most people will do, then it's best to try to find the real world call sign that's used for that flight, okay, or that day. Of course, airliners fly, or airlines fly from A to B airports, multiple times a day or maybe once a day, but you can just try to find a call sign which is kind of realistic, and this will also help the controllers to find a gate that is realistic for you, okay? So if you can, try to use a real world call sign, but the most important thing is that you use an ICAO code. So that's 3 letters. IATA codes are 2 letters, but ICAO codes, so ICAO codes are 3 letters, right? So in this case would be GTI, but it could also be KLM 241 or maybe Speedbird 241, okay? And again, this is also going to be important for other people's model matching, right? If you use the correct airline code here, then also people will likely be able to see the correct textures on their model. With that, it's also important to enter a correct type code. Now, again, this is in ICAO format, okay? So you can look up what is the type code of my aircraft in ICAO format. It's not as easy as you might think. For example, the 777 is really a pain when it comes to ICAO codes, because there are many different versions, and the ICAO codes look very different, as you can see in this list. So this is not only important for the controllers, because based on that they can kind of anticipate what your vertical profile will be, what your performance will be, but also for other people's model matching again. So if you do not put in a correct ICAO code, for example, you put here some kind of weird letter or something, if you don't put in correct code here, then other people's model matching rule sets will not recognize your aircraft, and then it will not be displayed correctly. So make sure that you put in the correct type code of your aircraft. In my case, we're flying a Boeing 747-400, so it would be B744. That's the ICAO format of any Boeing 747-400, whether it be a freighter or a normal passenger version. Now the cell call is something special. If you are flying over the ocean and you do not want to monitor air traffic control all the time, what the air traffic control can do once they do want to get in touch with you is send you a cell call code. These consist of 2 tones, and these tones are identified by 2 letters. Now each and every airframe comes with a specific cell call code. So you will usually find it in the cockpit. You can look it up on Google. So search for the registration on the back of your aircraft. That is used as your repaint. But if you're not going to fly oceanic or whatever, then it's not really necessary to put it in. You can also leave it empty. But just so you know, it exists. For example, for the previous aircraft I flew, the Boeing 737-800 here, and this particular 737 had this cell call code, okay? So it just consists of 2 letters, 2 pairs of 2 letters, all right? So yeah. Just look it up if you want to. Make sure everything is correct. We have a call sign, ICAO format, and then with either a combination of letters or numbers or just numbers. Then we have the correct type code in ICAO format, and we have the cell call that might be associated. Well, in this case, it's not associated with this 747, so I'm just going to leave it empty for now. I have to look it up what it is, but right now we're ready. Do not check the connect in shared cockpit mode. That's only if you're doing shared cockpits, but we aren't, so we don't have to. So now let's connect, and as you can see, there's some information that you're using the VATSIM network right now, and also refer to the user agreement and the code of conduct. And as you can see, immediately a lot of things happen. You can actually see all the controllers that are now online. So we have Melbourne Center, we have Melbourne Approach, Melbourne Tower, and ATIS, and also with their associated frequencies.
So congratulations, you now know how to connect to the VATSIM network properly. So once you're parked at an airport and you want to do some observing, of course you're going to have to tune the radio. So let's take a look at how that goes. So welcome into the cockpit of the Boeing 747-400. I'm just going to show you quickly the cell call code that you can also find on the aircraft. So
I was just referring to it. You can find it on the internet, but also sometimes it's included with the texture. So in this case, it would be Romeo Sierra Juliet Mike. So you can enter that. So let's take a look at tuning radios. As you could see in vPilot, ATIS was also online, and that's always a good frequency to start with. So the way it works, we're just going to put in the correct frequency in the radio in flight sim or in your aircraft, and you don't have to use any other method. vPilot will just scan both COM radios for what frequencies you've entered there. Now, I would just use COM1 if I were you. That's most easy. So just have one box to change. And then we move it from the standby to the active mode. And then we should be able to hear some ATIS. So let's take a look.
Melbourne Terminal Information Sierra. Expecting cement approach. Runway 164 arrivals. Runway 27 for departures. Wind 230 degrees. 07 knots.
There we go. So as you could hear, there was some ATC there, or the ATIS, and that basically means that you can receive it correctly. So in vPilot itself, you can also see what frequency is tuned in the radio. So now I've moved to a non-existent frequency that's in COM1, and also there's a frequency in COM2. And you can also see based on these buttons whether you receive or transmit on the frequency. Okay, so let's go back to the ATIS and see how that looks. So as you can see, this receive light lights up, and it indicates that we received the air traffic control audio properly. So I'm now going to tune in Melbourne Tower 120.5 and going to put it to the active mode. Now, do keep in mind you're now on active frequency, so as soon as you push the talk button, you're actually talking on the radio, and of course you don't want to do that if you don't have any experience yet. So just make sure you stay away from the push to talk key that you've set in vPilot, alright? It's not very busy right now anymore here in Australia, so it probably won't hear much chatter going on. But at least you know now how to tune the radios, okay? It's very simple. Just, oh, there we go. I think someone's gonna talk. Maybe not. Anyways, you can hear those kind of things happening, okay? At least you now know how to tune the radio. So inside the sim, move it from the standby to the active mode. Alright, it's very, very easy. So I'm just going to show you what happens when I push the talk button right now. So that's scroll lock, alright. As you will be able to see transmit light pop up. And of course I will not talk because I don't have anything to say at this stage. But just to show you how that looks. There we go. That was the transmit light pop up. So at this stage, people could have heard me if I were to talk. They probably did hear some background noise.
Melbourne Tower.
There we go. There we have someone.
Ready to go 27, holding point Quebec. Qantas 373. Contact departures airborne. Runway 27. Cleared for takeoff. Enjoy the flight. Goodbye. Qantas 373. Cleared for takeoff 27. Wind check, please. Qantas 373. Wind 230 degrees. 07 knots.
So there we go. That was the first ATC transmission that we actually heard on a VATSIM network. So if you have heard it correctly, there was actually a transmission that was clearing someone for takeoff and also giving the pilot some wind information. So there you go. You could see the transmit light light up as well when I was pushing the push to talk button. And that's basically the way it works here on VATSIM. And as you can see, it's pretty realistic. And of course, you don't have to keep the vPilot window open. You can just work from the cockpit. Just make sure that you know which frequency is tuned in. And then based on that, you can transmit and receive over the VATSIM radios.
So guys, I hope you found this video helpful and that you now know how to properly connect to the VATSIM network and how to do some observing. And hope you're having fun with that. If you have any questions or comments, make sure you leave them in the comment section below. And also make sure you subscribe to this channel so that you're notified about any new VATSIM videos that are uploaded here. So now that we have discussed all kinds of software and tools for VATSIM, in the next video we're going to take a look at hardware. So how to set up your home cockpit properly in order to fly comfortably on the VATSIM network. So guys, thanks for watching this video. Make sure you check out my other VATSIM videos, and if you'd like to contribute to the channel, make sure you check out the description to check out different ways of doing so. Make sure you comment, like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.